In this video, I will show you how to implement an info box that makes sure it's always visible on the screen. What you will learn is how to create a basic UI element with layout groups and how to use the rect transform, how to perform recasting from the mouse position so that we can display our info box when our mouse is over a 3D object, and how to make sure the UI element is always fully visible on the screen. I have started by creating a simple Unity project, a 3D project, and created a capsule for my nerd character and one capsule for my happy character. Let's start by creating the canvas. Let's right click in the hierarchy, UI and canvas. And let's leave it in the default settings. Render mode is overlay. That means that the UI is rendered on top of the scene and adapts to the screen size. Then we create our info box. Let's start by adding a panel. And let's name that info box. And when working with UI, I usually go into 2D mode. And let's make the info box a bit smaller. I'm gonna change the color of the panel to black, and then we want our sub items here, the text part and the sprite part, to be horizontally laid out. So I'm gonna add a horizontal layout group, and this will adjust all the child objects in a horizontal manner. Let's start by adding one panel for the text area and one panel for the portrait. In the text area, we want to display 4 types of information: the name, the character's favorite drink, how much cash they have, and their skill level. So I'm going to add a empty game object and name it name. And in that object, we are going to have 2 text fields. Name LBL for the name label, and let's copy that, Control D to duplicate. And name TXT, and this is where we will display the information. We want these 2 text fields to line up. So in the text panel, let's add a horizontal layout group. So what a horizontal layout group is, of course, to make sure that all the child objects line up horizontally. And we have a few options here. So spacing is the amount of pixels or the space you have between each object. Padding is the amount of space you have from the left side of the parent. So left side, right side, top and bottom. You can also tell them how to align the children, so if they should start in the upper left corner or in the center and so on. And you can also say that this controls the size of the children, or if we should use the scale of the children to size this object, or if we should force the child objects to expand. And in this case, we only want to control the child width, like that. And to see the effect of this, of course, we need to have an actual size of our text panel. So I'm going to make it 200 by 100. And of course, the horizontal layout group should not be on the text panel, but on the name. So let's click these 3 dots on the horizontal layout group component, copy component, and then we can click the 3 dots on the whatever component you have on the name object, and paste component as new. And then we can go ahead and remove that component from the text panel. Now we see that these are laid out. I want to add a little bit of spacing between them. So let's add 5. And I also want the name to be red, the name label. Let's duplicate the name object 3 times. And let's rename them to the corresponding information they should hold. For these objects, I want them to align vertically. So on our text panel, let's add a vertical layout group. And we see that it lays out all the child objects vertically. But we don't want the child objects to expand. But we do want to control the width and height of the children. And I'm also going to add some padding between the children and the parent object. Let's add an image object to our portrait panel. And select an image. So the image object will scale according to its parent on both axes or axis. And I want them to have a border, so 5 pixels from the left, 5 from the top, 5 from the right, and 5 from the bottom. And let's also put a size on our portrait panel, 100 by 100. Then let's go up to our info panel. And I want this one to adhere to the size of its content. So I'm going to add a content size fitter. And put in preferred size. Like that. And I want some padding. And also some space between the text panel and the image panel. Let's not forget to change the text in these different text boxes. let's make sure that all these text boxes fit within this box. So I'm going to select all the root objects of the text information, and by pressing Alt and collapse, you collapse all the sub objects as well, and I'll select all of them, and I want to control the height of the child size. And then selecting the text panel, we can add some spacing between them. Now it's time for some code. So I'm gonna create a new folder called scripts. And let's begin with the character info. That is the component that we're going to add to our capsules. Let's call it character info. And open that up in Writer or Visual Studio or your favorite IDE. So this will just contain information that we will show in the info box. Let's place these components on our capsules. And fill out the information. Let's create the two last scripts. Infobox and player controller. And open them up. Let's start by creating the player controller. And we will need some member variables. So movement speed is how quick we move, of course, and we're going to use WASD to move left, right, and up or down. We need a reference to our info box. We need our current movement, and we need to cache our player camera and have a reference to our last selected character info. In Awake, we will cache the camera. And we do that because camera.main internally performs a find with tag, which is quite expensive, as it looks through all the objects in the scene until it finds an object tagged main camera. In update, we will call our move method and an interact method. So for our basic movement, we are going to take in the horizontal and vertical axis and then lerp between our current position and our target position. For our interact, we want to perform a raycast to see if our mouse is over one of the capsules and then get the character information component and then set the information in the info box to that information. To get a ray based on mouse position, we can use the camera. And of course, performing a raycast, we need a raycast hit information. So the information about the raycast hit will be stored in hit info, and we use the physics to perform the raycast. There's a lot of different variants of performing a raycast. We just need a simple one. So we will send in our ray. And say where should the information about the hit be stored. We also need a distance, and in this case, as this is just a simple test, we can do the maximum distance. So physics raycast returns true if we hit something, or false if we don't. So if we don't hit anything, we want to hide the info box. And also reset the last character that we had selected. If we do hit something, then we want to get the reference to the info box or to the character info and set the info box information. We also need to check that if the current character is the same as the previous selected, we don't need to reset the information, wasting performance. Now it's time to continue implementing some of the functionality in the info box. We will need a few member variables here. And working with UI, we use rect transform instead of a regular transform. And the difference is basically you have things like pivot point, anchor point, and so on. And the world corners will represent the top left, the top right, the bottom left, and the bottom right corner of our canvas. Then we need references to the different text fields, and that resides in the unitengine.ui namespace. Let's start by creating a property so we can hide or show our info box. And we do that by just simply setting the game object as active or not. In Awake, we will gather all our references to all text fields and so on. we start by locally caching the transform of this game object, as we will use getComponent quite a lot. And we do that because even though it's kind of cheap to call transform, it is a property, so we can always just squeeze out a little bit more performance. Now we will find all the text field references, and this is prone to error because we will look for them and search for them by using a string, so try and make sure to spell everything correctly. And in find, we can have a hierarchy, so we can say go look in this object. And because find can return null, we can use the null conditional operator and saying only execute this method, the getComponent method in this case, if we retrieve something that is not null. Let's also make sure that we hide the info box on default. Now we need to create a method to change all the data. And we give the string parameters the in. And that is because even though a string is a reference type, it is sent in as a value type in methods. And in, of course, sends it instead as a reference, but makes it so we can't modify it. It's basically constant. And we start by checking if the already set string is not the same as the display name. Only then we will change it, and that is because when we set the text of a text UI element, Unity has to rebuild the actual mesh, and that is quite costly. We will make sure that the info box is always visible by modifying its pivot points. And for this we need the corners of the info box as well. The corners will be stored in the array in the following order, starting with bottom left, then top left, top right, and finally bottom right. So here we're saying if the position minus the size delta of the info box is less than the left position of the canvas, then we set the pivot on the x-axis to 0. And here we say if the position is further to the right than the world corner of the canvas, then we set the pivot on the x-axis to 1. Then we do the same for y. And then finally we set the pivot point. We need to be able to set the world point from our character controller. Let's actually do that as a property. And here we can use the rect transform utility to convert a world point to a screen point. Now we can go back to our player controller and finalize that functionality. Back in Unity, let's add our player controller component to our main camera and the infobox component to our infobox. Let's do a test run. And and we see I get an exception. So I got a null reference exception because portrait is null. And in Unity I named that object portrait panel. So let's try that again. Okay, so we notice we have an offset. And I'll see here that I have asked my info box to stretch. Let's change that to being centered. The anchor point should be centered.